Welcome, everyone, to A Breath of Fresh Career. This is Season 1, Episode 7. I'm joined here today by Steve Conn. And Steve is a Senior Director of Strategic Communications at Yale University. To intro Steve, I'm just going to read two very short paragraphs that I read about this guy. I don't normally do this, but they're so well written, and I'm going to butcher them. But he's amazing. So here's the deal. Steve Conn, who has worked in college athletics since his undergraduate days at the University of Miami, was an associate athletic director and the director of sports publicity for most of his Yale career. He joined the staff at Yale in 1987, and for many of his years in New Haven, served as a primary contact for football, men's and women's hockey, men's lacrosse, and heavyweight crew. We're going to talk about that because the heavy crew doesn't strike me as heavyweight, but though he has worked with other teams over his long tenure. In addition to the work on campus and traveling with Yale teams, he has assisted the NCAA in numerous postseason events. Conn has helped run Frozen Four, Final Four, hockey and golf regionals, and lacrosse national championships with Yale teams. He has been the publicity contact for national championships in hockey in 2013, lacrosse in 2018, and heavyweight crew in 17, 18, and 19. This guy is a husband, a father. He is an avid tennis player. Every single person I bring on here has got some sort of athletic background, which is crazy. This guy will run you all over the court. I swear to God. His wife, Emily, he is the father of two very athletic, either former or current NCAA college athletes, both Jeremy and Jordan. And he is a father of two kitty cats. Steve Conn, what's the name of your cats? Because they're just hilarious.
Abu and Zazu, two Disney characters.
Okay, Abu and Zazu.
Yeah.
So we're gonna talk a little bit today, Steve, about you, about what you do in publicity, and athletics, and we're gonna talk a little bit about NCAA sports potentially, and we're going to talk about technology that you use and how that's different from when you started back in the 80s and all that good stuff. But before we get started, tell us about yourself. How'd you get your start in sports publicity and communications?
Obviously sports publicity and just sports in general, passion for me. So growing up around the Yale campus with a dad who worked here for 40 years at the medical school and taught there, I was exposed to it a little bit because I love sports. And then we went away on a sabbatical for a year when I was 12 years old to Stanford University. My dad was there on sabbatical, and I really got indoctrinated and exposed to varsity athletics at a really high elite level, and was going to practices with some of the teams there as a 12-year-old, catching kicks from the punters and kickers and really getting involved in it, and said, this is kind of a cool thing, and didn't think much about it. Then I go down to University of Miami after graduating from Amity High School, and at the University of Miami really got exposed to another elite athletic culture where I got an opportunity to do radio, TV, write, and as a walk-on on the football and baseball, trying to walk on the football and baseball teams there, realized that I definitely wanted to be on the sideline of the press box, and it was quite an experience down there, an eye-opening thing. So, I go from University of Miami as an undergrad where I had all kinds of internships with newspaper, TV, radio, and things like that, to University of South Alabama in Mobile, Alabama as an intern, where I'm doing radio, baseball, and basketball, traveling with their teams throughout the South, seeing another part of the country that I'd never seen before. And then came back up here, worked for the Business Times, which was a newspaper. I was selling advertising and doing some writing, and then got the job with Yale and been there ever since. So really had a long career here at Yale, 34 years now.
You bring up one thing early on about walking on at the University of Miami, their college football team. Okay, like University of Miami. We're not talking about, like, no disrespect to the Southern Connecticut football team here, but we're talking about University of Miami. You were a kicker, if I remember it, right?
Yeah, I was a punter.
But
I didn't do it in high school, and I was playing like intramurals football down there, flag football, and I was punting a lot, kicking, and one of the guys, I guess one of the coaches was playing too from the Miami, and he said, "You got to come walk onto the team because we could really use a punter." The only thing he didn't tell me was that the walk-ons were really treated poorly, and I was lined up in the backfield and had to literally take on a defensive end who was 290 pounds, 300 pounds, coming at me as hard as he could to get to the quarterback before I would go punt. So I was getting killed. I separated my shoulder. I was getting just absolutely beat up in a week's worth of tackling and hitting and all the drills. They did it on purpose, and they had others that they recruited and were coming in. But this was the 1980s. This was on anybody that's seen the documentary, the 30 for 30 on the U. This was it, and it was a crazy culture and great experience. But quickly learned that wasn't going to be for me.
Sidelines and press box for Mr. Conn. Sports publicity. Senior director of what's the actual title? Senior director of strategic communications at Yale. What do you do? What's the day in the life of a sports publicity director and communications director at the university level?
The non-pandemic day of us is a lot of writing, photography, broadcasting, every element of it, whether we're setting things up or working with groups that are coming in to do broadcasting for us. There is a lot of websites, social media, where we're the liaison between the coaches and athletes and the media who are requesting interviews and covering us and covering Yale sports. We're trying to publicize all 35 varsity sports in their 3 seasons, and some are multiple seasons, and stay in tune with alumni and what they're doing. Because they're really important to us. They have great stories to tell once they've graduated from here, which is what we're doing during the pandemic more, because we don't have those games. We don't have those previews, those recaps, those highlights of the games and things like that, the things that you miss watching over at Ingalls Rink. We're not having that at the moment, so we are looking for stories on our athletes, whether they're the current ones what they're doing right now, and a lot of them are doing fun and interesting things, or the alums who are real world leaders.
I started a breath of fresh career for people who are looking to make a change, right? A lot of what I've been talking about is technology, and you bring up some pretty interesting stuff with regards to publicity and social media. Like, what technologies are you using today at Yale to publicize, your writing, get the information out there?
Sure. We're using mostly Adobe products like InDesign, Spark, Photoshop. We've got software that we use from the web that is called ScoreShot, and that's for graphics for social media. And we're using that in a lot of ways. We incorporate it more than just for games. We do it for other things to highlight, and we have a lot of the Yale branding within all of this so that we stay consistent in our Yale branding with regards to colors, typeface, size of font, everything. And so
all that attention to detail stuff.
A lot of Adobe products.
Yeah, unified stuff. Okay. Obviously, that's changed in the last 30 years, right? So, has it, how has it speeded things up for you guys to market, get to market, immensely, I'm sure, right?
Immensely. And I was in prehistoric technology before when I first came here. We're talking fax machines and photocopy machines, all kinds of things that you maybe you saw, maybe you didn't. But we were doing things. We didn't have the web. We didn't have cell phones when I started. So that tells you a lot. You
guys have a bunch of folks around you in the athletic department in keeping true to a breath of fresh career. Tell the listeners, what stands out when you're interviewing candidates that come in who are interested in being part of the athletic department at Yale and for open roles and open headcount. When you're hiring, when you're interviewing, when you have interviewed in the past, what stands out to you? What can people be doing today? Not just kids, but anyone be doing today to make themselves stand out and be different and be recognized as, listen, this is the candidate that we want to bring in into the Yale family. Tell us a little bit about what that means to you.
I would say that we feel the same way that the university does as far as admissions goes with diversity, and diversity is really important. So just someone who is solely focused on sports alone and can't talk about anything else isn't necessarily someone who would be as attractive as someone who is much more diversified in ways, whether it be hobbies or interests or reading or what have you. So some of the best people in our business in sports publicity, strategic communications, a lot of terms for it, are people who had a passion for sports, have a passion for sports, but were doing other things. They could have been history majors. History majors are really important to us because they are interested in what happened in the past, and they're good at digging and things like that. They don't just sit around and say, well, I'm a sports geek who, I love to crunch the numbers and see what's going to happen, and I can tell you a fantasy league and things like that.
Yeah,
No.
who hit the third home run of the 1984 season for the Red Sox? Yeah, right.
Exit velocity on the home run that was hit, launch angle level.
Moneyball.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, Moneyball, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So diversity is huge. I'm, by the way, history major, and I can dig. Oh God, can I ever dig? That's what I do for a living. Not only holes in the backyard, but also when I'm talking to candidates and clients alike, that's what you have to do. You're working for a very prestigious university, right? Everyone on the globe knows Yale University, right? What's your favorite part about working there?
To me, it's about working with the teams, being part of a team. I'm sure you've heard me talk about this, and working with the coaches and being the support staff for both them and the student athletes in ways that are seen with our social media and our website and things like that, and also ways that are not seen by the public, is mentoring and helping our coaches and student athletes, more so the student athletes, with finding internships and jobs. I've been involved in that for many, many years, where coaches send kids to me who are looking for whether it's summer or career opportunities in sports media, journalism, and sometimes beyond that because of the connections that I've been able to make with alumni over the years here. It stretches beyond sports.
I mentioned earlier, kind of in the intro, you have two sons. Both are, I know your younger son is still in college, the university level, playing football, Division I college football, when that ever comes back. And your other son, your oldest, is in sports as well, in a different category. But Jordan, your youngest, is kind of, it sounds like, following in your footsteps a little bit, huh? He's doing a lot of the sports publicity stuff up at UNH.
He's way ahead of me. Technology-wise, it was, of course, way more intuitive for him. So he actually had a head start because of the intuitiveness and growing up that way with cell phones and other technology. But yeah, he's doing a lot of very interesting graphics and social media and broadcasting and other things. So as far as when he got into it, way ahead of me. As far as the technology and what he's been able to work with and grasp and prosper with, he's ahead of me as well. So,
you say he's way ahead of you with some things, but we talk about in on a breath of fresh career, professional development and upward mobility within an organization. Man, you have learned so much in your time at in athletics at Yale. Walk us through your journey in the various positions you've held there, and the different responsibilities, because that's what paints the picture. That's what makes the person whole, right? Is all these experiences put together. It's irreplaceable. You could bring in, some 21-year-old person who's really good at social media, but they don't have yet underneath their belt. They'll get it, but they don't have yet the 30 years of experience that you have, doing what you're doing. So walk us through if you can.
Yeah, experience helps. We're talking about relationships here, and I know that's important to you. And I think it's really important. And maybe we've been getting away from it over the last 5 or 10 years, as far as talking to people, calling them on the phone, things like that. But I went from where I was on the senior staff, and we were doing a lot of administrative stuff for the department, making decisions for the team. I'm more in role right now is working with teams exclusively and being more of the historian for the athletic department. because I have the background and the experience with the alums and the history of what's happened here. So my role went from more administrative and publicity to more publicity and historical over the last 3 years. But I'd say, though, that what's really important, and we talk about, how the business has changed and what the roles have changed, but just with relationships outside of the university, especially, I think that's changed a lot. And I wish we were back to more talking to people on the phone, being able to see them on the road. I don't know how much more that'll happen, but that's how things have sort of evolved for me as far as what I've been doing.
Anybody that knows Yale University and Yale University athletics knows that Steve Conn is part of the history at Yale yourself. So you've definitely made a mark there, man. I mean, everyone knows you, which is incredible. But working in your current position, who would you say you work closest with right now? Like, is it individuals that the coaches, or is it other people in the AD department? Like, who are you working with?
Well, we're working a lot with the coaches right now, and the coaches and the student athletes, mostly with them. But now during the pandemic, we are being more creative. So we're needing to find other ways to promote Yale athletics. And that includes alumni and what current student athletes are doing, whether they're here on campus now, taking the year off and doing some gap year project that is worth talking about. That's what we're looking to do. So in that way, we're supporting both development, which is sustainability now, especially in these times, and also recruiting for the coaches by getting these stories, keeping web pages fresh. Each team doesn't want to have the last story be a month ago. It's got to be fresh. We need to come up with new stuff. So that's the challenge right now in these times, is coming up with stuff where we're not having games, not having a weekend full of games. We've got to come up with other ways to sell Yale athletics and promote the good things that are going on here.
One of the things that I remember about our conversation, I remember a ton about our conversations, but one of the things that strikes me that's related to this is social media. And I remember that, I don't know if you're still doing this, but there was a time at Yale where you were like the guy that was brought in to talk to the entire team at all levels about social media and the impacts that social media can have on their development. Walk us through a little bit about those conversations and how important it is to keep a clean social and public profile for your college athletes and alike. Because I want people to really recognize, gone are the days where it's okay to have pictures and videos of you crushing beers and doing all this other stuff. So people are looking at that stuff. Walk our listeners through those conversations you've had.
Yeah, it's funny because I even did a video years ago that would be embarrassing to bring up right now, that we sent out email to all student athletes. That I did. I went to a studio and we did this and we showed examples of things that got people in trouble. And I talked about people having their own brand. They were their own brand. And I know that some of the administration here was not real happy with me using that word because it sounded more like Alabama, Michigan, and UCLA than a prestigious liberal arts school like Yale. So it still was true, though. They did have their own brand. As soon as Twitter and Facebook and everything else came out, these kids who grew up with it were definitely creating their own brands, which they are. So now we're probably have to speak to them less about it, but yet the reminder always has to be there that think before you hit send. Take a look at it if you're not really happy with what would go out to, say, the front page of the New York Times or the ticker on ESPN about you and what you're about to send out, then don't send it.
That's interesting. New York Times, the ticker on ESPN, that's real. It's so funny. Many of the folks that listen, I talk about my kid a lot, 13-year-old, and he's got a couple of these apps, right? And I saw him, sending a picture, a funny, goofy picture of like his face or something. All the guys on his team, kids on his team were sending funny pictures. And I'm like, dude, I don't know if I'd send that. Somebody could Google your name and somewhere out there that might show up, so you always, create your own brand. That is absolutely huge. Part of this is making, or having conversations with folks like yourself, where people can take one little snippet away, create your own online brand. I mean, that is just huge. Going back to your job really quickly, because I want to ask this, and obviously this is a different time with COVID, and we're going to get into college sports and COVID in a second, but what do you see as the most challenging aspect of your job?
Probably the most challenging thing is keeping things fresh all the time, because teams that are not competing in a season during non-pandemic times still want to have fresh things up. Being able to stay up with everything that's going on, trying to monitor what's being posted by some of the teams in social media, which is a real challenge with 35 varsity sports. And, say each of us have 7 or 8 teams, that might be a couple hundred athletes, and you're trying to monitor what's going on. Maybe not always individually, each their accounts, but certainly with their team. And they do have access sometimes, and we need to make sure that we're constantly reminding them of the brand, of appropriateness, of things like that. So that's probably the hardest stuff.
Well, let's hop to the other side of the tracks here, man. COVID-19, college sports. What's going on? What's the latest news about college athletics at the Ivy League level and elsewhere, and in this pandemic?
Yeah, the Ivy League doesn't have fall sports going on right now, although athletes on the campuses are practicing. At Yale, we're in phase 2, which means, for instance, the men's ice hockey and women's ice hockey team are able to go on the ice with no more than 10 people and a couple of the coaches under certain protocol, and they can do that. That just started 2 days ago. The Ivy League will be making an announcement more than likely around Thanksgiving to determine whether or not winter sports are happening after January 1. So many of the leagues around the country, or I shouldn't say many leagues around the country, are trying to figure out what they're doing, but Ivy League and leagues that are affiliated with the Ivy League, like the ECAC for hockey, are trying to figure out what's going to happen if Ivy schools will be competing in their conferences. And so there's a lot to it. There's a number of levels. It's complicated. Someone's going to have to make a decision on it. It's not easy to create a bubble for college athletics. It's virtually impossible. And so they have to be able to figure out how to make that work. College football currently is making it happen, and they're having pretty good numbers right now. So they're doing okay.
Okay. So what happens? Just, let's think about the specifics here. You got how many teams did you say you had?
35 varsity sports.
35 varsity teams.
Yeah.
These folks, they need to make multiple schedules. It's a lot of back office stuff, right? I mean, they don't know yet when the season's going to start. They need to plan for a regular season, or they need to plan for an abbreviated season. I mean, there just must be like a ton of work that goes into the planning of all that. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, there is. They're trying to figure out what's happening, and the kids are looking at it and trying to figure out what they want to do. Some have taken gap years and things like that because it's just better for them. They want to avoid losing any eligibility, and they figure it can get very complicated in the league with no grad students competing. So you need to be an undergrad, so you need to time it so that you can fit that in to 4 years of competition in a 5-year window. So that's where it gets complicated, and schedules are all over the place depending on the team and the sport and the class year. So it's so multi-leveled.
What I usually end a breath of fresh career by asking a couple questions, but before we get in there, I gotta talk to you a little bit about a personal thing. It's the point system. and the point system in golf. So I play golf with this guy, Steve. I don't know, beginning of the good golf season, I don't know, it was early summer or something like that. And he's like, let's play this point system. This guy created this point system for golf, and it was so much fun. Can you walk us through? Because if we could spread I guess the gospel of your point system, everybody's going to be playing this as a fun way to play the game of golf.
We did it because sometimes if you
because we're both awful at golf.
You get behind 8 or 9 strokes after 3 or 4 holes, you want something to be able to shoot for here. You can't just go in the tank. You got to keep competing, and that's what we're all about, is competition here. So you get the longest drive in the fairway, on the green in regulation, a sandy, a birdie.
So lay them out. Lay out the points and refresh my memory. You get a point
for each of those. So you might be 5 or 6 or 7 strokes behind overall, but your points, you might be competing points. You can get 3 or 4 points on a hole, and you're back in the game. So it's all about. I think it levels the competition. Instead of saying I'm going to give you 2 strokes on par 4s or par 5s, we play the point system. I don't think you have to give anything in that same scenario.
All right. So hold on. So let's virtually play a hole here for our listeners. So let's say it's you and I on the tee.
Yeah.
And I just rip a drive and it rolls out of the fairway. And then you hit your 3-wood. Because I was making fun of him. He didn't take the drive route, but 1 hole. And he was down the middle every time. But he hits his 3-wood or fairway wood or whatever the heck you had. And it's in the fairway. So you essentially got the longer of the 2 drives in the fairway. So you'd get a point.
If I was really a competitor, I'd bring out the pitching wedge and put it in the fairway just to get the point from you.
Exactly.
But I would never do that.
So 1 point, Steve. Okay. So second shots, you're hitting from the fairway, and let's say it's a par 4 and we're going for the green in regulation. And I put it on the green from just outside the fairway, and you roll off the green or you're short. So I then get a point for hitting the green. So it's 1-1. Okay. Then I thankfully and luckily putt in for birdie, which is a very rare occasion. That's a 2-point deal.
At our level of golf, it's
okay.
A 2-point deal.
So right now I'm 4. So I'm 4 and you're still at 1 because
it was 1-1 and you got 2.
And then I just put it in for birdie. So that's 2 more. That's 4.
Okay.
Right. And you're off the green, but let's say you chip in from off the green. How many points is that?
Well, that would be for a birdie also.
It'd be for this is why I asked the question. Be for a birdie. So it'd be a chip in, which is, you said was 2 points, and then a birdie's an additional point. It'd be 3 points.
No,
so it's tied.
Yeah, nothing for the chip in itself. It's just if you get a birdie, it's 2 points.
Okay. But what happens if you're in the trap on your second shot and you get a sandy and a birdie? Is that 3 points?
Yep.
Okay. So we're tied up at 4 because you went in the trap. You approached the ball. We thought it was short, but it was in the trap, and you chipped in sandy, 1 for the drive, measly little 3-wood drive. Second.
You kicked my ball into the trap.
No. That's not me. That's our mutual friend, Andy, when he plays golf. Anyway, man, is there anything that I should have asked you and didn't during this?
I think you did a great job covering everything.
Okay.
I love your versatility. You're so versatile. You're amazing. You can go into sports and talk intelligently, do games, which you have done for us on ESPN broadcast at Ingles Rink.
Oh boy.
And you can talk business, tech, everything. So.
Well, thanks, Steve. I was a history major, so there you go. I checked that box, right? What how can people best connect with you? Is it LinkedIn? Is it email? Is it phone? Like, how do you want people to connect with you after listening to this?
LinkedIn is great. I do check that a lot, and I connect with all the former athletes here and other people I've worked with over the years and peers across the country.
I'm sure you're open to, you have a ton of relationships with other athletic departments all around the country as well. And, this could be a forum you should think about, and I can help you as well, starting, maybe a college podcast, a college athletic department podcast. And, you're great at it, man. So I think you guys would have a lot to share and a lot of value to bring. And I'll put a link of your LinkedIn profile in the write-up of this podcast so people can easily find you.
I'm lucky number 7, right?
That's it. Lucky number 7.
So
we got to get back out on the golf course because tennis I love, but not when I play against you at all. Anyway, Steve, I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for coming on. I'll put a link to your I will put a link to your LinkedIn profile. Anybody who enjoyed this, please subscribe, and we'll be producing another podcast in 2 weeks' time. Thanks, Steve.
Sounds great.
All right, buddy. See you.
Bye.